Good morning, everyone. We have had quite a few questions come in this past week. I'm finding that not everyone is able to make it to the calls, so they've been throwing in questions here. So I'm trying to figure out what time is the best time with all of the time zones to make this happen. So yeah, this is 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, AM. So it's like early for others that are further west of me. So it may not be happening for all of you. Also, summer for some of you is tough. So questions, let's start going over some of these. My child is a totally different person at school versus home. What does that tell me about their stress pattern? That's a really good question. So this is the thing is sometimes, we'll go to these, not we, well, I did this with my one son, my other son, this wasn't the case, but go to the school interviews and the teachers will talk about how good your child is and how they cooperate or how they listen. And you're like, really? That's my child? Because at home, they are completely different. At home is when the meltdowns happen and stuff. It could also be the opposite where, this wasn't true for my son too, where like the child actually might really struggle at school, but they're calmer and they're good at home, which I will say my son had a lot more explosions at school. He was a lot more, well, my one child was a lot more. That's the one reason I pulled him out is because of how many explosions happened at school. And we still do have them at home, but they're less, and I'm able to work and use strategies and stuff. I mean, like way less now. We rarely have them now. So how can it be so different? And this is the thing, there's two pieces to this. One is that if we think about the Coke bottle and a Coke bottle that's shaking, so that Coke bottle is constantly shaking from all the little stressors that are happening. And as they're at school, there's more and more and more shaking, but they're able to keep that lid on their Coke bottle. And then as soon as they're around you, who is their safe space. So at school, they know they have to keep it together. They know they have to. So they kind of go in their stress system, they go more into turtle, where they're able to turtle. They're able to, they're still in a stress state, but they know that they can't explode. Right? As I said, this wasn't my son. His Coke bottle came off and he exploded at school. So this may be your child too, but if they're different, if they're really well behaved at school, but not at home, it's quite often that they've switched into that stress animal of a turtle. And the thing with this turtle is that most people look at that turtle as being, oh, well, this is like a really good kid. They're a really well behaved kid. They'll say all these really nice things about this child. And the thing is that we have to stop and look at, is this a stress sign? Or is this actually a good, really well-behaved kid at school? And I remember in senior kindergarten with my one son in January, the teacher came up to me and said, your son, she's like, he's talking to all the other kids now. He's starting to talk to the kids now, not just the adults. And I went, oh, it's January. School started in September. I'm like, why am I only hearing about this now? I mean, this is also phenomenal teacher that, oh my gosh, she was just like the child whisperer. She was amazing with kids. But I didn't know this was happening. And so if we stop and think, he was behaving, he does what he's asked all of the time. He's good at anticipating what is expected of him, and he would reply to the teachers. That's all stress, right? He wasn't fully engaging, being a kid, completely relaxed and happy with other kids around him, which he is at home. Well, it takes him a while as well when he's around new people. So it's only people that he would know on a regular basis, that he would, totally be a kid, totally let loose. That's taken him a while. It's taken him a while of us actually working on his stress system, which I didn't even know that his stress system needed work and support. And I worked with stress systems with first responders all while I was doing this, because my other son was always exploding. And it was very, very apparent with my other son who was exploding that his stress system needed help. And that's where I was working on all the support. He also had major eczema and gut issues and all of these things, mood swings all over the place. all of the stuff that is related to stress. And my other one was the quiet one, right? He was the turtle. And even at home, he just gets quieter when there's an issue. He gets quieter and inwards, and it is hard to get words out of him and stuff. I wish he's come such a long way. And all of that, though, was stress. So a child can mask. They can completely mask at school when their Coke bottle is still shaking and be really good and behaved at school or out with others when it's expected of them. And when they're at home, when they're in your safe space, that bottle top comes off and that's when they explode. It does not mean that they're not stressed at school. Okay. So it's really important to understand those two things. It's not that they're not stressed. The odds are they're masking. And the more that they mask, the more they're probably going to explode at home with you after, when you're their safe space, when you're the one that they know that they can explode around. And yeah, so I really start looking at masking and what they're masking at school. And if they are different. Now, if it's the opposite, where they're exploding at school and not at home, that would be, I would really look into stress systems as well, as to what's stressing them out of school. Are there things being asked of them that their brain can't think of? So that's when we're looking at from an executive functioning point of view. Are they struggling to, does their working memory, so the way that they process directions and words, are they struggling when the teacher asks them to do something to remember what's being asked of them? Are they struggling to, just focus enough to follow the rules? Are they always interrupting in class? Like, if they're the behavior child at school, it could be that there's just so much stimulation, so much going on. It could be auditorily, they're taking in way too much. It could be visually, they're taking in way too much. Could just be like sensory overload. They could be feeling everybody's energies. I know for my one son too, just even like synthetic fragrances and scents. So the cleaners that they're using, the soap, if he goes to the bathroom and uses their soap, meltdown, right? So is figuring out what for that child are the struggles at school, because the teachers aren't taught all of these things, not all of these stress signs. So it's a lot of things that could be going on. That Coke bottle of theirs is shaking so much and it just keeps imploding. Whereas maybe at home, it's a calmer environment. It's quieter. There's not all these like chaos of the kids and everything going on. They're not being asked to do the work that maybe is taxing their brain in a way that their brain doesn't think yet, that we haven't worked with them to help that part of their brain, which then a teacher keeps trying to teach them the academics in the academic way without understanding that that executive functioning part of their brain needs help, not the academics. So they're constantly, switching. Also the social aspects, right? If a child struggles to perceive what others are wanting or needing, or how to read other people, a lot of misunderstandings can happen. They can get teased, they can get bullied. Like, there's all kinds of things that can happen at school. So then maybe at home is calmer for them as well. But I would start looking into all the stressors at school. If at home, they're pretty good, and figuring all of that out. Okay. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay. Another question. Oh, this is a good one. What should I look for when I can't figure out what sets my child off? And this is hard. Like I just said to you, like synthetic fragrances, I had no idea for me. For the longest time, I did not know or understand why, when I hated going into a grocery store or going into a shopping mall. Oh my gosh, when there's like a Bed Bath and Body, Sephora, like I've never liked makeup, but it's always been the smells, right? And I never understood why. And I am so sensitive. Like I think of a bomb sniffing dog. Most people don't know when they're smelling that there's drugs in something, or there's a bomb in something, or they can even sense when somebody's having an epileptic seizure, right? These dogs are phenomenal, and people around them don't know this is about to be happening, right? Or that the drugs are there or the bombs are there. And that's me with synthetic fragrances. So most people can't tell, most people aren't fazed by them, but I am. And so is my son. And there are situations where like, oh my gosh. So my husband knows this, but he had his hockey equipment and he Febrezed it. And he put all the hockey equipment in garbage bags and put it in our basement. Now, so our house We walk in upstairs and you have to go across the house to the stairs to go down the stairs into the basement. So we are like at this door here on this one side of the house. And you have to go all the way across to the door to the basement, going down into the basement. But my son and I walked into the house, my one son and I, and instantly we're like, what's that smell? And like, I got really grumpy, and I got really, really grumpy with him, and with my husband, started getting really upset. And just a second, I'm gonna pin my, there we go. I got really, really grumpy and instantly getting upset. And my son started hitting his brother and yelling, and my husband instantly knew he put Febreze. So like, that's one that's just so random. You could be like, what the heck, right? So when we're talking about the things that are stressing out your child, they can be so random. They can be so different for different things. They can be synthetic fragrances, environmental toxins. They can be visually too much stimulation, auditorily too much stimulation. They could be like really sensitive in what they're on clothes or how something feels in him. My one son just got braces last week, and I'm so proud of him as to how he's doing, but it has been so tough because he can feel everything. Like, he's so sensitive to changes and touch and feels that it's just been, he's really trying to handle it, but it has been sensory overload. So these kids that have these extra sensors, the ones that like feel others' emotions, right? I know that that's where my husband and my one son butt heads, is my husband doesn't realize that when he's totally tired and exhausted and like kind of has this energy of like, oh my God, I just can't do this with this child, my son feels it. And that's when they actually butt heads more, even though my husband is trying and trying. So they could be feeling your energies. It could be where their executive functioning part of their brain, the part that takes in information, the part that stops them from they need to start making decisions. So even if a kid is constantly running across the street without looking, that could be their working memory and their inhibition, their impulse control, to be able to, you know, pause and think and stop. Those parts of their brain may be struggling. They may have really good big black and white thinking, perfectionism, that fear of making mistakes where everything has to be one way, fear of change. All of these things we have to start diving into. Do they struggle to start tasks? Do they struggle to remember what you ask of them? How do they perceive things in their environment? Are they good at reading people or not? All of these things start taxing all of us, and they're all different stressors. So finding out, so going back to this question of what should I look for when I can't figure out what set off my child? So you start thinking about this Coke bottle. This Coke bottle is shaking from everything that I said. If whatever your child is struggling with, it shakes and shakes and shakes. When that Coke bottle finally explodes, it's because of all the shakes that happened before that. And some of them are like invisible to us, that we have to start learning and understanding and deducing what were all the stressors that they had. What stressors can we easily take out so that the child doesn't even have to do work at this moment? What can we do to take those stressors out and make it a little easier for them? Honestly, that's where it got to the point where I pulled my one son from school, because I was like, okay, he's constantly having meltdowns that I'm getting called 3 times, 5 times a week to come and get my kid from school. And I'm like, okay, so that environment he needs out because he's much better at home. So let's pull him out, and then let's try to figure out the stressors under that. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that with him. I know not every parent can, but this is where it's that Coke bottle shaking, and Coke bottle shaking. And when it explodes, it's because of all kinds of other things. What it is for each child is different. How they, you know, what order you take them out is different. How you help and support the child is different. So it's really hard when all of these people are selling these solutions to solve an issue. And they're like, yes, we can, you know, we can help stop your child from doing this. And it's this one solution. That's not going to work for everybody. Right. So it's really hard when the map for every child is different on that. Okay, so that answers that question. We have somebody that just popped in. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. And if you'd like, if not, I do have another question that another parent has asked that I can answer. So yeah, if you have a question, I'll just give you a second to unmute and ask if you'd like. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next question, but if you do have something, you can either ask, you can write it in the chat, or you can, yeah, you can write it in the chat for me that you have a question, and I'll get to you like as soon as we're done. I do have a hard stop today at 10 too, because I'm back to back calls all day today. Okay. So the next question that I do have is, how much do things like sleep or after school fatigue affect emotional regulation and behavior? Huge. The answer to that is absolutely huge. So I'll go with the after school fatigue. If we start thinking about all of the demands that were on this child during the day, especially if they're masking a lot, if they're not perceiving things or not hearing what the teacher's asking, or they're not able to get the answers on paper the way that a teacher is asking, or all of the sounds and noises and stimulation and feeling the energies and the different scents and smells and lights and all of these things that happen in school, and having to just behave all day is a lot to ask of somebody. And so after school, oh my gosh, these kids are quite often too, we don't eat enough or drink enough during the day. That what I used to do, we used to do a walking school bus with the neighborhood kids. And as soon as I'd pick them up, I'd have them all look in their lunch boxes to see what else was in their lunch. And they'd actually, if they needed, depending on the moods of the kids that day, I would actually just sit there and let them all finish eating their lunch. If they could walk with it, we would walk. And I'd always have extra snacks with me. I found that the beginning of the school year, we needed way more snacks than the end of the school year, because their minds and bodies adapted to all of the new learnings, the new school, the new routines, the new teacher. They needed more fuel. That I would always have like whatever, oranges or sliced apples or anything that I could just like hand them in a jar, and whoever, or in a container, and whoever needed could take. And it was amazing to see the difference of their energy starting to perk up as we walked home. If not, we wouldn't always get home before there were meltdowns and exhaustion and they couldn't get there. Or we'd walk in the door and it was just not fun. So I learned to always make sure. Sometimes too, I would just bring a fun drink. If it was for my kids, like in one thermos that they could share, and then I brought another thermos for the other two siblings that they would share. To sometimes just get their blood sugars up, just to make it home and to rehydrate them if it was a really hot day. Because here, not all of our schools have air conditioning and stuff. They're so old. And yeah, it was crazy. So that fatigue thoroughly affects them. Now let's talk about the night sleep. So night sleep. So I'm a sleep coach as well. With night sleep, when you the process to fall asleep is you have cortisol in the frontal lobe of your brain. That is your energy, your stress hormone. And so because it's your energy hormone as well, if it's still firing at night when that child needs to fall asleep, that's when like we have all these thoughts, all the things that are happening in their day. What, like maybe they might even be this creative child that like you might find when you go into their bed, they start asking like 50 million questions about all of these things. And they're just like, their brain will not stop. Now, caveat to this, some of the neurodiverse kids that we work with, like their brains are like on fire all of the time, that it takes quite a while to be helping these kids. And they get to a certain level with some of them. We're able to definitely help and support some of them, or all of them to a degree. Some of them will never get to where their minds will not fully shut off, but they do in a pretty good way. So we have this cortisol, sleep hormone. And so that needs to lower first for your natural melatonin to kick in. Your natural melatonin is your hormone that tells your body it's time to sleep and to get you into a good sleep. So the melatonin, or the magnesium, the cortisol is what needs to lower first before the melatonin kicks in. Once that melatonin kicks in naturally, and then as they're in a sleep, there are 50 different hormone responses that our stress system is responsible for. And most of those hormone responses that they start to heal and repair while that child is sleeping, while we're sleeping as humans, like all adults too. And so these are everything. There are ability to remember the things like store things into our brain that we learned. They're all of the physical things that we've learned and done. There are cholesterol, blood pressure, our mood regulations, our ability to just handle and manage moods, traumas. This is a big one too. If you're not getting to the sleep, then things start to affect you more and anxiety increases, and the ability to things start to become, no, that's not the right wording. When something happens that's too much too soon, it can easier become a trauma in somebody when they're not getting into all of those proper sleep patterns and sleep. So sleep plays such a large role on this whole stress system. It's where your nervous system realigns itself, and your nervous system is in charge of, your stress system, your ability to react and handle stressors. So your resting system really needs to be kicking in while you're sleeping. But if your stress system keeps kicking in, then all of these hormones can't do what they need to do to be to their best ability to be realigning themselves and healing and repairing. So we start getting where our mood regulations, like if we just think about us when we have a really late night, it could be like a fun party, we're out. The next day or sometimes the day after is when like it starts hitting us and feeling with us. It's when we're like shorter with our kids, not getting as much done around the day, maybe some more brain fog. This is the same thing when a child is having less sleep as well. They also go through different growth spurts during their stage. So anytime they're in a growth spurt, like their body needs way more sleep. And if they don't have a good sleep routine, if they're not able to get into a good sleep, if their nervous system is firing all of the time, then they're probably sleeping in a stress nerve versus sleeping in their resting nerve, and not everything can heal and repair. And it becomes like this vicious circle, which then definitely affects their moods. So there's so many pieces, like there's things to actually do in the day to be helping with their sleep so that they have a better sleep. There's things to be doing with their night routine in order to be helping that child with sleep. And so they both do work hand in hand, that as we're working on the stress system, the sleep does usually start to improve as well. And if we notice things in their sleep routine and stuff, we can fix that. Then it does help with their sleep, which then helps with the things that we're doing in the day to them. So it's this cycle with both and everything. Awesome. Okay. I have one more question to answer. If anybody who's on this call would like to ask a question themselves first, because you're here, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. If not, I will move to my last question here. Okay. I'm just checking the chat here. There's nothing. Okay. So I'm going to go to this next question then. What should I do when I feel like I've tried every strategy out there and nothing is helping my child long term? Yeah, this is frustrating. Helping your child is not going to be a quick fix. I just want to say that to anybody and everybody. Like, it's not just going to happen overnight. It's going to be slow. That I would ask somebody that's saying if they've tried every strategy and there's nothing helping your child long term, I would first ask you to stop and look back at where your child used to be and where they are now. Have there been any improvements? Like, there might be just small things, right? And quite often we don't stop to notice the small things because we have this end goal. And if there were small things, I would stop and ask about what tools or strategies have you used that helped a little bit? Because those are the tools and strategies that we would start working with, maybe maximizing, maybe working through. I would also get you to create for me a list of everything you've tried so that I could see if there are things on that list you haven't tried. I'm going to ask, because I know executive functioning is a big one for a lot of parents. that they've never dove into. And I'm going to say for me, like, I'm a sleep and stress coach. That was, I was first, like working with first responders and doing all these things for sleep and stress, gut, hormone, nervous system, like everything, sleep, like just all of the stuff we were doing. And still I was missing a piece with my son. And that's when I eventually discovered executive functioning. And I was like, oh, that's a big piece of his puzzle. Because if you're working on the breathing and the sleep and the nervous system and working on their hormones or working on helping their gut or whatever food they're eating or getting them exercise and doing like all of the things, but you haven't looked at all into how their brain functions, how their brain works, if they struggle with attention and refocusing, if they struggle with impulse of like hitting or yelling or blurting out or having to do certain things, that's like their initiation, their impulse control. That's part of their executive functioning. And those are things that we have to look from a very different lens. Nonverbal and verbal working memory, where how does that child take in information? Are they able to take in, if you say, one or two steps to them verbally and then walk away, do they remember what you've just said? Because that all starts taxing this child. So yeah, like it's just fascinating when you start thinking of all of the pieces. Are there social pieces that are affecting this child? Are there nutritional? Are there physical? Are there emotional? Is there like physical too, can be the sleep? Are there the mental, which is a lot to the black and white thinking, perfectionism, fear of making mistakes, struggle stopping things? Do they struggle with that part of their brain that allows them to see mistakes? That's different than being able to correct mistakes, two different pieces of your executive functioning system, right? So you may have a child that a teacher hands back, or you say to your child, like often, like, we've corrected this on you. Like we've told you shouldn't do this like 20 times or that's going to break, but they keep doing it. They may not even have that part of their brain that allows them to notice when they are making a mistake. Might be a struggle, right? So then they have like time sense and pacing. Are they always rushing things? Are they always going too slow with things? Or do they even understand how long something's going to take them? Then we get up there, like, can they organize? Can they plan? Can they analyze things? Can they generate things? Can they make decisions? All of these are the executive functioning part of the brain. And so if your child is struggling with those, if you've already worked on breathing and nervous system and hormones and gut and food, and you've done all the things and you've made some progress, but like your child is still struggling, I would always dive into that executive functioning piece. And that's why I was like, okay, like this is crazy. Like, I'm a sleep and stress coach. I'm getting these first responders off of medical leave back into, active duty during the pandemic. And I'm like, and my child, I'm doing all this stress stuff with him and he's still melting down. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And that's where too, I had to become an executive functioning coach, because a lot of the executive functioning coaches out there as well, I'm so grateful to who I learned from. But the other executive functioning coaches quite often start working on those high level skills: planning, organizing, decision making. They give them checklists, but they're not actually working on the part of the brain that helps them so that they don't eventually need checklists, or that they can make these lists on themselves, or they can start figuring all of these other pieces on themselves. That they're not helping with the attention or the impulsivity, or they're only working with the attention but not the other pieces that are happening. So because my son has so many of those pieces, it's not just like one executive functioning coach that works in just one piece of this, or at a really high level one. My son had the lower level struggles that I needed to help first. I talk of it like a fire. So quite often, a lot of the executive functioning coaches work on the fire skills, the skills that we see. My child can't plan, they can't organize. So they start giving them checklists and they start teaching them how to like try to organize all of their schoolwork and stuff, but they're not looking at the lower skills, the kindling skills that you need in order to even light the fire, and the log skills that keep the fire going so you can see the flame. So they're often missing those pieces too, that even if you have gone and worked with somebody with executive functioning and it didn't help your child, I would be curious, were they working on flame skills, and were they missing log or kindling skills when they're working with them? Because that's another piece too, that if you do get stuck. Now, there's another piece to this. And this is one that I didn't at all think would happen when I started working with kids with big emotions is how large of a role the parents play. And that's why when I've created the framework after working with kids for quite a while, I've there's like two pieces in my base framework is being able to work on that connection with your child. And that means that as the parents need to start working on their stress animals, on their stressors. So if you're instantly want to go into a shark, or you're going into clownfish where you need to fix everything, or you're going to turtle where you just get quiet and kind of like pull back, those are all stress animals. And I'm finding that when I start working with the parents on helping their stress animals, so they're more endorphin, that their child starts feeling more connected. And through doing that, they're learning the tools themselves so that they can actually go and teach their kids. It's hard for a parent to teach the tools to a child when the parent hasn't experienced what it feels like. Like, it is so easy to say, okay, go do your breathing. But have you tried that when you're stressed and you're in the middle of a moment? Like, it's not possible. It's really hard to do until you have worked on it a lot, like outside of it, and you really understand how you need to build it really slowly. So yeah, it's just the parents piece is a big piece to it as well. I mean, I can work with kids and really help the child, but if the parent as well is like, I'm 1 hour a week with the kid, the parent is all of the other hours. Sorry, the parent is all of the other hours outside of that. So it's really hard. It's way more effective when the parent is also learning the tools that I'm teaching this child on themselves, because if they know how it feels, then it's easier for them to also help and support the child as well. So I'm realizing how big of a piece of the puzzle that is, the more that I start integrating parents into the work that I'm doing with the kids. Okay. All right. And we have a question. Yes. I can't. You're unmuted, but I can't hear. If you have a question. I don't want to say names. Oops. You just muted again. Okay. Did you have a question? Because if you have a question, you're more than welcome to ask it. If not, I will close out this call. I know I have to be off in 5 minutes, but I can definitely answer any questions you may have. You do? So I've seen you've unmuted a couple of times. I'm not sure if just the button's being hit or if it's not working.
I have a question with trying to get my son diagnosed for the specific sensory issue he has, auditory. How do you do that when usually it's an OT and the schools are supposed to do it, but the school boards have cut funding, so until they're at a later age, it gets to be hard how to seek that kind of route, how to get them diagnosed or those needs met.
For auditory, like an auditory processing struggle?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a sensory trigger with already having ADHD and ODD, but it has to be diagnosed. But how do you go about doing that when they're under the age of 7?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's so many rules and regs with the school, and going through the school is really tough. There is a Facebook group that if you Google on Facebook, like auditory processing disorder, there's a really good auditory processing disorder Facebook group. And there's a lot of parents that have navigated a lot of that may be able to help and support you. There is also a really, really good Facebook group for IEPs and 504s that actually has people in there that, I don't know if they're lawyers. I don't know what the word, like, their actual job is to help people advocate to get all this stuff in the IEPs and stuff for kids. So they're really up on the rules and regs and how to advocate for what you need to advocate in order to get the testing, in order to get the IEPs, all of these things. They help you in those groups with what wording to say to the principal, to the, counselors, to everybody in order to get that stuff done. So that's one thing that I would do, is check out those two groups, because those will be a wealth of knowledge on that. That's definitely not my expertise. When it comes to auditory processing, like, so with my son, I have wondered as well, the more I've learned about executive functioning too, how much of it is self-modulation, of them being able to turn down that dial of the sounds that they're hearing versus turn it up. And he has gotten so much better at tuning out other noises and other sounds as we've been working on some of the self-modulation executive functioning skills. So that's where I wonder too, like, how much of each plays. Like, my son's hearing is ridiculous. I tell him it's his superpower. Like, I've trying to encourage him to slightly get into some music stuff because of his ear is just phenomenal. But at the same time, it's almost like kryptonite, where it's almost like too many sounds are just deafening. But he's getting used to being able to turn it down and what to focus on and what to not focus on, right? So if we think of ADHD too, it can be not being able to have attention, but it can also be the hyper focused as well. And so when they're so hyper focused on the noises and things around them and what's stressing them out and what the anxiety is playing at them, then if we can start helping them as to where to redirect their focus and how to modulate that sound in their brain, so that when they need it, it's their superpower, and when it's their kryptonite, they can turn it down. So that's one route I would go with it. That being said, in the auditory processing group, they talk about different hearing aids that are specific for people that actually hear above hearing, to be able to turn them down for them, which is the opposite of most hearing aids, which, as I'm learning as well, most audiologists are not trained in. So it would be also looking in your area for an audiologist that is trained in hypersensitivity, hyper auditory skills and stuff, and auditory processing. If you can start finding an audiologist, I don't know what the what's it called, like insurance and all that stuff where you are. I know, like, here our kids get a certain number of audiologist appointments every couple of years, and it's just finding the right audiologist to help with that as well can make a difference. And that auditory processing group, I do know that I asked years ago about people that are in my city, and they gave me a list of people that they would suggest in my city to go to for audiologists. So if you were in that group too, you could maybe ask as well, where's an audiologist that I could, get a that understands this in my area, so you can actually get a official report from them. I don't know. Is that helpful?
That's insightful. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, my pleasure. Any other questions?
Not right now.
Okay. All right. Good luck. It really is a struggle because most people don't understand it. They don't understand the overhearing at all. And they don't know what your life is like when you're living with it. And you have a child that's constantly like, stop tapping. And you're like, I didn't even know I was tapping my fingers, or you're chewing too loud. Like it becomes a lot. People don't get it. And they tell them, like, just stop being so sensitive. So it really is a lonely route. It's such a lonely route. But from things I think we've spoken before as well, you're heading in the right direction, and your child is just so lucky to have you advocating for them, because it's tough advocating for these kids, for sure.
Oh yeah. No, it sure is.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
They don't even give IEPs, and the board just in this area, just the school board cut the funding, and I'm at the school board that has more funding than the public school board, but it's still,
Yeah.
they don't want to give them until they're 7. They'll
Yeah.
do behavior plans, but they don't want to issue IEPs because they don't want parents having control of the teachers.
Yeah. I mean,
Your kid has to be like extreme where they almost need their diaper changed at like an age that's beyond normal. If you're
Yeah.
not at that stage, then they're like, oh, well.
It's hard with all the funding. I mean, for us here too, it's just been crazy that they just cut all of the teachers' aides in the classes, and now the teachers just have all of the kids to now manage, which is so hard. And yeah, and I think because parents are now understanding more about IEPs, more parents are advocating for them too. So it becomes a lot, but an IEP, I know we spoke about this last week, an IEP as well, though, the language that the IEP is written in, the teachers don't like, what is a learning disability of written expression? Like, what the heck is that? And even too, like saying ODD, right? It won't actually probably say ODD, it might say ODD, but it won't actually tell you what that child struggles with. What does this look like for that child? What is it? So the teachers are even reading these IEPs and they're not necessarily helpful to a teacher, because how a child presents is, and what stresses that child and what helps that child is so individual to each child. And the teachers don't have that, like, that's not written in the IEP, which should be, so that the teacher can read the IEP and actually know, oh, this is what this means for this child, and this is how I can support that child. That's not in an IEP. So, like, it does give that parent the ability to say, okay, my child needs help, but the teacher needs way more information from the parent, that sometimes even with an IEP, how you approach that teacher might, get you even further at times
I
than,
agree. Just
yeah.
when the principal's adamant about not giving it because they already have enough like high needs children, I've noticed you have to go to a school that has less
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's,
because they don't want to allocate that extra funding. They only have so many teachers assigned to that stuff and they want it for the extreme children. If you're in
yeah.
between, you'll get lost. You got to actually go to a school that has less IEPs to exercise that human right.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is if they started working more on executive functioning, I think a lot less kids would even need an IEP, because right from kindergarten, they would already be supporting their executive functioning struggles, that these kids' executive functioning skills would strengthen every year. And the child's going to need less and less support as they're going through. If that would be my dream for schools, my total dream, but it doesn't seem to be going that way. I kind of have this belief that sometimes things need to really break before real change can adapt, and the school system has been the way that it has been for so long. And I know, like, there's so many teachers that are just like would love, they see all these other ways they could be helping and supporting these kids, and they can't because of the way the school system needs it has to happen, and the way they have to do things based on their rules and guidelines. And so, like, if they were really to sit there and talk with the teachers about, what would help these kids? What do you see? And start making those changes, it would make a difference. But I think it almost has to break more before they'll start listening, unfortunately. Oops, I can't. I know you're speaking, but it's muffled. Oops, can't hear. Okay, I do have to go because I have another call in 5 minutes and I need to run and go have my bio break. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. You can email me support@andiclark.com, Andy with an I. The emails that go out for these calls as well, just reply to them. I'm always here to help and answer questions as best as I can. And if you want, you can book a 30-minute call with me too, I think they're 25 minutes, in order to ask questions as well in person if you would like. All right, take care, and I will see you, I believe, next week.
That fit a little better.